No one in the courtroom expected what happened next. A quiet Tuesday morning hearing was moving at its usual calm rhythm. Traffic fines, expired registrations, missed court dates, until the door opened and a woman stepped inside with a presence that instantly tightened the air. Some recognized her from magazine covers, others from red carpet interviews. But it wasn't her fame that froze the room. It was the way she didn't look famous today. She looked exhausted, haunted. Her hands trembled as she clutched a small blue purse against her chest, as if it were the only stable thing in her life. Her eyes were red. Not the dramatic kind from makeup, but the quiet kind that comes from a night spent swallowing tears. And when she exhaled, it sounded like relief and dread at the same time. Judge Frank Caprio looked up, and for a brief moment, even he paused. This wasn't just another case. Something was off, something deep, and no one knew yet that this hearing would end with the entire courtroom completely silent, and changed. Her name was Lena Marin, wife of international film star Adrian Marin, one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. Tabloids adored them. Paparazzi chased them. The world had decided long ago that their marriage was glamorous, enviable, and made of gold. But the courtroom saw something different. Today, she stood before a judge over something simple, almost embarrassingly small compared to her public image: 3 citations for reckless parking, 2 ignored court notices, and 1 charge for disrespecting an officer. To the press, it would sound like the classic celebrity stereotype, entitled, arrogant, unreachable. But in person, there was a fragility in her that didn't match the headline version. Still, the murmurs began instantly. "That's Adrian Marin's wife, right? She's the one from the award shows. What happened to her? She looks different." The bailiff called her case number, and Lena lifted her chin just slightly, trying to compose herself, only to flinch when dozens of eyes swung her way. She wasn't used to this kind of spotlight. This one felt colder, sharper, judgmental in a way cameras could never capture. Judge Caprio had seen thousands of faces cross the worn wooden floor of his courtroom, faces full of fear, frustration, guilt, hope, but fame rarely entered this room, and when it did, it usually came wrapped in denial or defensiveness. He watched Lena step forward. He noticed her trembling hands. He noticed how she avoided eye contact. He noticed the way she whispered "good morning," like someone bracing for impact. Judge Caprio had long believed that the courtroom reveals the truth of a person, stripped of spotlights, stripped of applause, stripped of the world's expectations. But something in her posture told him that this case wasn't going to be about a few parking violations. Something else lived beneath the surface. He could feel it before she even spoke. "Mrs. Marin," the judge began gently, "you have 3 citations and 2 missed court appearances. Is there any explanation you want to provide before we proceed?" Her throat tightened. The courtroom leaned in. She inhaled, slow, shaky, and then, unexpectedly, her voice lashed out, sharp with panic. Do you know who I am?" A collective gasp rippled through the room. Judge Caprio didn't react immediately. His face remained calm, unreadable. Lena instantly regretted saying it. You could see it in the way her shoulders collapsed, as if those words weighed more on her than on anyone else in the room. Everyone expected Caprio to scold her. Everyone expected the usual headline moment. Judge puts celebrity spouse in her place. But instead, he simply folded his hands, leaned forward slightly, and asked, "Mrs. Marin, do you know who you are today?" The courtroom fell so silent you could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. Lena blinked, confused, and then her eyes filled with water. Something had cracked open. She swallowed hard. "I'll explain," she whispered, "but it's not about the tickets." Judge Caprio nodded, giving her time, space, and humanity. Lena's voice trembled as she spoke again. I I never miss things like this. I'm not someone who ignores letters. I'm not someone who parks wrong or yells or—" She paused, fighting for breath. "Or expects people to treat me differently because of my husband." Her lip quivered as she looked up, almost apologizing to the world. "I haven't been myself for a long time." A hush swept the room. Judge Caprio didn't rush her. He simply waited, giving her the dignity of silence. Lena continued. "For the past year, my mother has been battling late-stage cancer. I've been traveling between Providence and Los Angeles every week. Hospitals, treatments, relapses. I thought I could manage everything. I told myself being strong meant hiding everything." She wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed. "The day those tickets were issued, I wasn't rushing to a red carpet. I wasn't out shopping. I wasn't doing anything irresponsible on purpose. I was trying to get my mother to an emergency appointment. She collapsed in the house, and Her voice broke. "I didn't know if she was going to make it. I parked wherever I could. I didn't think. I needed to get her inside." Some people in the courtroom lowered their eyes, suddenly feeling the sting of their earlier judgments. Lena swallowed again. "And the officer? I didn't disrespect him because I'm entitled. I snapped because he kept asking me why I parked illegally, and I thought every second I spent explaining was another second my mother wasn't getting oxygen." She shook her head, guilt consuming her. "I reacted wrong. I shouldn't have raised my voice. I wasn't trying to pull fame or privilege. I was just scared. Terrified. I thought I was losing the only parent I have left." Her voice cracked. "I've been terrified for a year." Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair. And in that moment, he wasn't looking at a celebrity's wife. He was looking at a daughter breaking under the weight of grief, fear, and responsibility. He spoke softly, carefully. "Mrs. Marin, I'm very sorry about your mother. No one should have to carry that alone." Lena nodded, tears slipping silently. "But I need to understand one thing," Caprio continued. "When the court notices arrived, what happened then?" Lena closed her eyes, and this time her answer changed the entire room. "I didn't receive them," she whispered. "My husband intercepted them." A wave of stunned murmurs. "Why?" Judge Caprio asked gently. Lena's jaw trembled. "Because he didn't want any embarrassing incidents hurting his public image." The courtroom froze. Even the bailiff's face tightened. Lena kept speaking, quietly, painfully. "I begged him to let me come handle it. He refused. He said I needed to stay invisible until my mother's situation was over. He took the notices, said he'd take care of it. And he didn't." Her hands shook violently now. "I wasn't hiding from the court, Your Honor. I was hidden." And just like that, the twist shattered the room's assumptions. Judge Caprio inhaled slowly, processing the truth with the gravity it deserved. The courtroom seemed to exhale all at once. A few people shifted in their seats, others froze completely. The revelation sat in the air like a weight no one knew how to move. Judge Caprio allowed the silence to stretch, not uncomfortably, but respectfully. Some truths needed room to breathe before anyone dared respond to them. Finally, he spoke, slow and careful. "Mrs. Marin, I want to understand this clearly. You're saying you were unaware of these court notices because your husband withheld them from you?" Lena nodded. It was the smallest movement, barely visible, but it carried years of exhaustion. "Yes, Your Honor." "Did he tell you why he chose to do that?" A hollow, bitter laugh escaped her. "Because he didn't want the press spinning a story. He kept saying, 'We're already dealing with enough,' as if my mother's illness was somehow a branding problem." She clenched her hands together. "He said I'd be too emotional, that I'd make things worse. He told me to focus on being presentable for a charity gala the same week the court letters arrived." Someone in the back whispered angrily, "That's cold." and the bailiff gave them a warning look. Judge Caprio's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened, a quiet disapproval no one needed explained. He folded his hands. "Mrs. Marin, let me ask you something more personal. You don't have to answer if you're uncomfortable." Lena looked up with eyes that said she had been uncomfortable for a long time. "Are you safe at home?" A ripple of heat moved through the room. Not a sound, not a breath. It was the kind of question that required bravery just to hear. Lena didn't answer at first. Her lower lip trembled, and she blinked rapidly, trying to hold herself together. But then she exhaled, shaky, trembling, releasing something she had been holding far too tightly. "I'm not unsafe," she whispered. "Not physically. He's never laid a hand on me." She paused. "But I haven't felt seen in years, and I haven't felt like I can choose for myself in even longer." The words were heavy with a different kind of pain, one without bruises, but just as damaging. Judge Caprio listened intently. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. This, too, was a part of his courtroom, seeing between the lines. Lena's voice grew softer. "My marriage isn't what people think it is. The world sees red carpets and smiles and interviews. They see a power couple. But behind closed doors—" She swallowed. "I'm an accessory, a shadow, a curated image." Her voice cracked. "I wasn't allowed to break down about my mother because it would distract him during award season." Someone near the front shook their head in disbelief. Lena continued, her voice thinning with each word. "And when my mother was hospitalized last month, he said I should stay in Los Angeles for an event instead of flying to Providence. He kept telling me people are watching, as if strangers mattered more than my own parent." Her hands curled into fists. "So, when those tickets happened, I was already drowning. And when the officer questioned me, I snapped. Not because I'm entitled, but because I'm tired of living in a world where my pain doesn't matter." Judge Caprio's gaze softened profoundly. "Mrs. Marin," he said gently, "everyone in this room can see that you're carrying more than anyone should bear alone." A tear slid down her cheek and she quickly wiped it, almost apologizing for it. Caprio continued, voice steady and empathetic. "I ask you these questions not to pry, but to understand. The law requires context, and humanity requires compassion." His tone shifted subtly. "But I need to ask one more thing. When you said earlier, 'Do you know who I am?' What did you mean by that? Was it frustration? Panic? Something else?" Lena closed her eyes, reliving the moment she wished she could take back. "It wasn't arrogance," she whispered. "It was fear. Pure fear." "Fear of what?" Caprio asked softly. Her answer hung in the air like a confession. "Fear that if people only see me as the actor's wife, no one will ever listen when I'm drowning." The courtroom went still. The truth had finally surfaced. Not about fame, but about invisibility. A woman in the second row discreetly wiped her eyes. A man near the aisle shifted uncomfortably, guilt etched across his face for the assumptions he'd made minutes earlier. Even the bailiff, usually stone-faced, softened. Judge Caprio glanced around the room, not seeking validation but acknowledging the shift. This wasn't merely a case anymore. It was a human moment, unfolding raw and unfiltered. He returned his gaze to Lena. "You've been holding all this inside, haven't you?" She nodded. "For how long?" he asked. Lena breathed out, voice trembling. "Since the day my mother was diagnosed. Adrian wanted everything kept private. Said the public couldn't know she was sick because it would shift the narrative." Her voice hardened with shame. "My mother wasn't a narrative." She sniffed, wiping tears. "This whole year, I was caring for her alone, flying back and forth, hiding the truth, pretending everything was perfect. And every time I broke down, Adrian said I was being dramatic, or ruining the mood. Her shoulders collapsed inward. I lost myself trying to protect his image. I forgot I even had one. Judge Caprio took a long breath, letting her words settle. Then he leaned forward slightly, voice low and sincere. "Mrs. Marin, has anyone asked how you're doing?" A tear fell instantly. She didn't even try to hide it. "No," she whispered. "Not once." The courtroom watched as Judge Caprio fell into quiet thought. He wasn't just processing the details, he was weighing humanity. He saw this woman not as a celebrity spouse, not as a headline, not as a courtroom spectacle, but as a daughter caught between grief and an impossible marriage. He spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. "Mrs. Marin, let me tell you something I've learned in this courtroom." Lena looked up, eyes glistening. "People often think strength means silence," Caprio said. "They think being strong means holding everything in, pretending nothing hurts. But true strength, real strength, is the courage to say, 'I can't carry this alone.'" The air thickened with emotion. He continued, "You didn't come here today to defend parking tickets. You came here because life finally cornered you. And today is the first time you allowed yourself to speak your truth." Lena covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Caprio added, softer, "And you should never apologize for that." A few sniffles echoed from the benches. But the moment was far from over. Judge Caprio straightened slightly. "Now, the question becomes what we do from here." Lena tensed, bracing as if preparing for a punishment. But Caprio noticed. "Relax, Mrs. Marin. No one is here to hurt you." Her shoulders dropped an inch. He looked at her citations on the screen. "On paper, these are minor charges, a few fines, a missed appearance. But behind them lies a story much larger than the tickets themselves." He paused. "And as a court, we must decide what justice looks like, not just legally, but humanely." Lena swallowed, eyes shaking. "Your Honor, I'm sorry for snapping at the officer, for saying what I said when I walked in. I'm just—" She choked on the words. "I'm so tired." Caprio's face softened even further. "I know," he said. Then he asked, "Mrs. Marin, is your mother still with us?" Lena nodded weakly. "But she's not improving. She's in and out of consciousness now. Some days she remembers me. Some days she doesn't." The courtroom felt her heart break like a physical presence. "And does your husband help?" Caprio asked quietly. She hesitated. "No," she whispered. "He says it depresses him." Gasps rippled through the room. Lena's voice cracked open completely. "I go through it alone. Every appointment, every update. Every night she stops breathing for a moment and I think she's gone. I'm alone for all of it." Judge Caprio closed his eyes briefly, just a second, but enough to show he was absorbing the full weight of her reality. Then he opened them, gaze steady and compassionate. "Mrs. Marin, you're not alone right now." She broke, tears spilled freely, shoulders trembling. Judge Caprio cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Marin, I have one more question. It may be difficult." Lena straightened, bracing herself. "Yes, Your Honor." "Why did you come here alone today? Does your husband know you're in court?" Lena shook her head quickly. "No. If he knew, he'd try to stop me again. He'd say it makes him look like he can't manage his family." A fresh tear fell. "I told him I was going to visit my mother." Caprio's brow furrowed deeply. "And does he know you're thinking of leaving him?" The entire courtroom inhaled sharply. Even Lena froze. She stared at Judge Caprio, stunned, as if he'd spoken a truth she had only whispered to herself in the dark. Her voice came out barely audible. "How did you know?" Caprio gave a gentle, knowing smile. "Because sometimes the loudest words are the ones a person doesn't say." Lena covered her face, sobbing. The courtroom? Dead silent. Lena lowered her hands slowly, tears streaking down her cheeks. She didn't bother wiping them this time. There was no point pretending anymore. Not here, not now. Judge Caprio waited, giving her the dignity of time. The courtroom remained frozen, as if afraid a single sound might break the fragile courage she was finally showing. Lena inhaled shakily. "I've been thinking about it for months," she whispered, leaving, starting over, being someone again, instead of being an extension of him. She paused. "But I keep stopping myself. Because every time I get close, he tells me the same thing." Caprio leaned forward. "What does he say?" Lena closed her eyes, repeating the words she hated most. "He says, 'Without me, no one will care who you are.'" A stunned silence fell across the room. Judge Caprio's face darkened, not with anger, but with a profound sadness that came from years of witnessing all the different ways a people could be hurt. He spoke softly. "And do you believe that, Mrs. Marin?" Her voice cracked. "I used to." She looked up, and in her eyes was something new, something small but unmistakably brave. "But today, I'm not so sure." The shift was so subtle, so fragile, but it carried the unmistakable spark of someone standing for the first time after being on their knees far too long. For a moment, Judge Caprio didn't speak. He rested his hands on the bench, gaze thoughtful, steady, yet gentle. The courtroom watched in reverent silence. Inside, he was remembering. He remembered the widows who'd walked into his courtroom with trembling hands and empty purses. He remembered the single parents forced to choose between a fine and feeding their children. He remembered men and women who carried invisible bruises, loss, fear, heartbreak, burdens they couldn't put on paper. And now he saw this woman, famed by the world, ignored by her own home, standing before him asking, without words, if she mattered. He took a deep breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried the weight of decades of wisdom. "Mrs. Marin, I've been sitting in this chair for a long time, long enough to see that suffering doesn't care about fame or fortune. It doesn't skip over the rich or the well-known. Everybody bleeds the same when life cuts them." Lena's lips trembled. Caprio continued. "I've seen people walk in here with suitcases full of sorrow they never meant to pack. I've seen them break under the smallest weight because they've been carrying too many invisible loads." He paused, letting his words sink into her. "And I can see that you have been carrying a load that no human being should have to carry alone." A quiet murmur of agreement rolled through the spectators. Caprio wasn't finished. "You asked earlier. Do you know who I am?" Lena lowered her eyes in shame. He leaned forward slightly, voice deep and kind. "But the real question, the important one, is, do you know who you are?" Her breath hitched. "You are not someone's accessory. You are not someone's publicity risk. You are not a shadow. And you are certainly not invisible." Lena's eyes overflowed, tears sliding freely. Caprio's voice grew firmer. "You are a daughter fighting for her mother. You are a woman suffocating in a cage built out of fame. And you are someone who, despite all of that, came here today, not to save an image, but to save a piece of yourself." Her knees wobbled. She steadied herself on the podium. The courtroom was silent enough to hear her breath cracking. Judge Caprio looked at the screen displaying the charges. 3 parking violations, a disrespect citation, 2 missed notices. On paper, a simple case. In reality, a year-long plea for help wrapped in fear, grief, and silence. He exhaled slowly. "Mrs. Marin, I need to ask one final question before I issue my ruling." She nodded, bracing herself. "After everything you've told me, what do you think is fair?" The courtroom inhaled collectively. No one had expected that. Lena froze. I don't know," she whispered. "I didn't come here expecting mercy. I didn't come for sympathy. I needed to tell the truth. For once. Caprio's eyes softened. Then, tell it now. Lena swallowed. I should pay the fines. I did park recklessly. I did snap at the officer. And no matter what I was going through, I shouldn't have done that. Her voice steadied slightly. And I hope, the court can understand why I wasn't myself. Caprio nodded thoughtfully. Thank you. He leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming softly on the bench as he reached his decision. The room held its breath. Judge Caprio began slowly. Mrs. Marin, I want you to listen carefully. Lena nodded, tears still falling. For the parking violations, the fines could be significant, and for the missed notices, the penalties could be even higher. She looked down, accepting whatever came. But justice, Caprio said softly, is not blind to circumstance, and compassion is not weakness. It is humanity. The room leaned in. Your mother needed you. You acted out of fear, not arrogance. You reacted as a daughter trying to save her parent, and that matters. A pause. As for the disrespect citation, I believe you regret your words deeply, and regret is often more effective than punishment. Lena pressed a hand to her chest, overwhelmed. Caprio's voice grew warm, firm, fatherly. So here is my ruling. Every person in the room went still. I am dismissing all 3 parking violations. A soft wave of reaction swept through the benches. I am dismissing the disrespect citation. Another gasp. And regarding the missed notices, he paused deliberately. You cannot be held responsible for mail you were never allowed to see. Tears streamed down Lena's face. The courtroom burst into hushed murmurs, surprise, relief, admiration. But Caprio wasn't done. He spoke with the tone of a man who understood life far deeper than laws alone. Mrs. Marin, the fines are dismissed, but your sentence is this. The room froze. You must stop living in silence. It wasn't punishment, it was permission. Lena covered her mouth, sobbing. Caprio continued gently. You must take care of your mother. You must take care of yourself. And you must remember that no person, no matter how famous, has the right to make you feel small. A tremor ran through her entire body. And one more thing, he added softly. You deserve to be seen. Lena nodded, crying so hard she couldn't speak. The judge smiled kindly. This court wishes your mother peace, your heart strength, and your future freedom. A tear slid down his own cheek, rare but sincere. This case is dismissed. Lena didn't move at first. She stood in disbelief, trembling, broken open but somehow less broken than before. Then, slowly, she whispered, Thank you. Not the polite kind, not the forced kind. The kind that comes from a soul finally taking its first breath in years. As she stepped back from the podium, the courtroom parted for her, not out of awe for her fame, but out of respect for her humanity. Some people nodded at her gently, others smiled softly. One woman mouthed, Stay strong. For the first time in a long time, Lena felt seen. Judge Caprio watched her walk out, then looked down at the bench, deep in thought. Narration settles over the scene like a closing light. Justice isn't always about laws. Sometimes it's about listening. Sometimes it's about reminding someone they matter. And sometimes it's about giving a person the courage to save the life they're still allowed to live. As the door closed behind Lena Marin, the courtroom remained silent. Not out of shock, but out of reverence. Some cases end with a gavel. This one ended with a woman rediscovering herself.